A reading from The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. The original text featured is copyright C.S. Lewis Pte. Limited, first published in 1950, and Narnia is a registered trademark. The White Witch has demanded a blood price for Edmund's treachery, but the lion Aslan has agreed an alternative price to settle the matter and satisfy the deep magic from the dawn of time. Part 3. The Triumph of the Witch. As soon as the witch had gone, Aslan said, "We must move from this place at once. It will be wanted for other purposes. We shall encamp tonight at the ford of Baruna." Of course, everyone was dying to ask him how he had arranged matters with the witch, but his face was stern, and everyone's ears were still ringing with the sound of his roar, so nobody dared. Before 2 o'clock they were on the march and set off in a northeasterly direction. During the first part of the journey, Aslan explained to Peter his plan of campaign. "As soon as she has finished her business in these parts, the witch and her crew will almost certainly fall back to her house and prepare for a siege. You may or may not be able to cut her off and prevent her from reaching it." He then went on to outline 2 plans of battle, till at last Peter said, "But you will be there yourself, Aslan." "I can give you no promise of that," answered the lion, and he continued giving Peter his instructions. For the last part of the journey it was Susan and Lucy who saw most of him. He did not talk very much, and seemed to them to be sad. They came down to a place where the river valley had widened out, and the river was broad and shallow. This was the ford of Baruna, and Aslan gave orders to halt. Peter asked if it might be better to camp on the other side of the water for fear that they might be at risk of a night attack. "No," said Aslan in a dull voice. "She will not make an attack tonight, but it was well thought of." So they pitched their camp. Aslan's mood affected everyone that evening. Peter was feeling uncomfortable at the idea of fighting the battle on his own. Supper that evening was a quiet meal. Everyone felt how different it had been the previous night, or even that morning. It was as though the good times were already drawing to their end. This feeling affected Susan so much that she couldn't get to sleep. After turning over and over, she heard Lucy give a long sigh beside her in the darkness. "Can't you get to sleep either?" said Susan. "No," said Lucy. "I say, Susan, I've a most horrible feeling, as if something were hanging over us." "Have you? Because as a matter of fact, so have I." "Something about Aslan," said Lucy. "Something dreadful is going to happen." "There's been something wrong with him all afternoon," said Susan. "Lucy, what was that he said about not being with us at the battle? You don't think he could be stealing away and leaving us tonight, do you?" "Where is he now?" said Lucy. "Is he here in the pavilion?" "I don't think so." "Susan, let's go outside and have a look round. We might see him." "All right, let's," said Susan. "We might just as well be doing that as lying awake here." Very quietly the 2 girls crept out of the tent. The moonlight was bright, and everything was quite still except for the noise of the river chattering over the stones. Then Susan suddenly caught Lucy's arm and said, "Look!" On the far side of the camping ground, just where the trees began, they saw the lion slowly walking away from them into the wood. Without a word, they both followed him. He led them up the steep slope out of the river valley, the very same route which they had used that afternoon. He looked somehow different from the Aslan they knew. His tail and his head hung low, and he walked slowly as if he were very, very tired. Then, when they were crossing a wide open place where there were no shadows for them to hide in, he stopped and looked round. "Oh, children, children, why are you following me?" "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure she need say no more, and that Aslan knew what they had all been thinking. "Please may we come with you, wherever you're going?" asked Susan. "Well," said Aslan, and seemed to be thinking. Then he said, "I should be glad of company tonight. Yes, you may come, if you will promise to stop when I tell you, and after that leave me to go on alone." "Oh, thank you, and we will," said the two girls. Forward they went again, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion, but how slowly he walked, and his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. "Aslan, dear Aslan," said Lucy, "what is wrong? Can't you tell us?" "Are you ill, dear Aslan?" asked Susan. "No," said Aslan, "I am sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so that I can feel you are there, and let us walk like that." And so the girls did what they would never have dared to do without his permission, buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur, and stroked it, and so doing walked with him. And presently they saw they were going with him up the slope of the hill on which the stone table stood. They went up at the side where the trees came furthest up, and when they got to the last tree, it was one that had some bushes about it. Aslan stopped and said, "Oh, children, children, here you must stop, and whatever happens, do not let yourselves be seen. Farewell." And both the girls cried bitterly, though they hardly knew why, and clung to the lion and kissed his mane and his nose and his paws and his great sad eyes. Then he turned from them and walked out onto the top of the hill, and Lucy and Susan, crouching in the bushes, looked after him, and this is what they saw. A great crowd of people were standing all around the stone table, and though the moon was shining, many of them carried torches which burned with evil-looking red flames and black smoke. But such people, ogres with monstrous teeth, and wolves and bull-headed men, spirits of evil trees and poisonous plants, and other creatures, cruels and hags and incubuses, wraiths, horrors, ifrits, sprites, orkneys and wooses and etins. In fact, here were all those who were on the witch's side, and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing by the table, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up from the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing towards them, and for a moment even the witch seemed to be struck with fear. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "The fool!" she cried. "The fool has come! Bind him fast!" Lucy and Susan held their breaths, waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies, but it never came. 4 hags, grinning and leering, had approached him. "Bind him, I say!" repeated the White Witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when he made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarfs and apes, rushed in to help, and between them they rolled the huge lion over on his back and tied all his 4 paws together, shouting and cheering as if they had done something brave, though the lion could have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemies pulled the cords so tight that they cut into his flesh. Then they began to drag him towards the stone table. "Stop!" said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Masses of curling gold hair began to fall to the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children could see the face of Aslan looking small and different without its mane. The enemies also saw the difference. "Why, he's only a great cat after all," cried one. "Is that what we were afraid of?" said another. and they surged round Aslan, jeering at him. "Oh, how can they?" said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The brutes, the brutes!" For now that the first shock was over, the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver and more beautiful and more patient than ever. "Muzzle him," said the witch. They worked about his face, putting on the muzzle. One bite from his jaws would have cut off their hands, but he never moved, and this enraged all the rabble. Everyone was at him now. He was surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures, kicking, hitting, spitting on him and jeering at him. At last the rabble had had enough. They began to drag the bound and muzzled lion to the stone table. He was so huge that it took all their efforts to hoist him onto the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. "The cowards, the cowards!" sobbed Susan. "Are they afraid of him even now?" When once Aslan had been tied onto the flat stone, a hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags, holding 4 torches, stood at the corners of the table. The witch bared her arms as she had the previous night when she had attempted to kill Edmund. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. At last she drew near. She stood by Aslan's head. Her face was working and twitching with passion, but his looking up at the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then just before she gave the killing blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, "And now who has won? Fool! Did you think that by all this you would save the human traitor? Now I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you have given me Narnia forever. You have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die." The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look and had covered their eyes. To be continued. In the next part, as Susan and Lucy mourn Aslan, they learn that there is a deeper magic from before the dawn of time.